Welcome to Align to Your Design. I'm your host, Beth Davis. Isn't it time to wrap your business around your purpose and bring your greatest work to the world? Each week, join me as we explore various biometric tools such as human design and hand analysis and how to use them to fulfill your destiny and align to your design. We will reveal how to do the work you are designed to do rather than what you think you should do. Gary, hi.
Hey Beth, how you doing?
I'm so glad we're doing this today. So, we were just talking about attachment styles and that you had just read this giant book on attachment styles. And will you go over that with me again about how there's all these different strategies people use to try and create connection, but
Mhm.
then what the ultimate is for someone who's actually secure in their intimate relationships?
Okay. So I read these big, hairy scientific things just for fun.
Well, you and I are nerds, so
We're nerds, right?
yeah.
And there's one book, let me get the
Yeah, get the book. I want to see it.
assessing adult attachment. But this is it, right?
All right, right.
Yeah. And it goes through, anxious and avoidant and disorganized. And it's there's a spectrum here, but it breaks down each attachment style into just a little anxious, maybe a little more, a lot more. Now you're getting, and all the way over to the stuff that would land you in a mental institution, all the stuff. Then it does it for avoidant, just a little avoidant, maybe emotionally secure, but a little avoidant, a little more, a lot more, and then over the stuff that gets you into psychopaths and sociopaths and stuff like that, right? And then they do the same thing for disorganized, because those are the three attachment styles, plus, and then at the very end, they're discussing secure. And there's this interesting thing. You read all these strategies and both mental and biological that's going on in attachment. And they make a point that secure can do any of that stuff. All the strategies are available the same way it is to those other brains that got wired and anxious or avoidant or disorganized, right? But the difference is the secure are consciously choosing it based on appropriate contextual clues. They're not bound to it as a grooved experience that's going to fire off anyway. And they're not choosing, they're not at choice with it. It's not, internally driven by fears and projections. It's based on context. But I found that to be one of the most interesting things in that book was the secure have all the same tools that are being misused by the others, except they're choosing it. So if the secure, you think, are they going to go really off and angry like the anxious? They can absolutely can. They could get as angry as a borderline, but it's not grooved. It's not going to go beyond the context, and it is appropriate. And they have thought about it, realize it's the best deal available. The brain always takes the best deal available, and they can choose it in the moment because it is appropriate. Now, most times we don't have radical situations. So, and a lot of those strategies and the others came from radical situations, radical abandonment, radical intrusion, whatever, abuse, trauma. But I find it interesting that all of its tools are available for the secure. Now, if you're one of the others, this doesn't mean that necessarily, I can act like that, because if it's from past pain and it's not really in the context, and this is the rub, if you've got one of the others, I know it's in the context, but no, they're saying as a general rule, you may be using tools based on past pain, but the secure really they have what's called behavioral flexibility.
Right. That makes sense.
It is no different than, 20 some years ago, I had to help my high school just refused to give my son his rights as a 504 student. He had a mental, he had a learning disability. And after 2 years of being blown off, I had a meeting with the vice principal and the 4 teachers that were saying, nope, we don't need to. And I even had the law there. And finally, I had to just look. I said, and I mentioned their addresses. And I said, how do I know your addresses? Because if this doesn't change, I will get up in 5 minutes, call my attorney, and you'll all be served in your classrooms tomorrow for a lawsuit. And by the way, I'm not suing them. I'm suing all of you personally. I'm going to make an example of y'all. If you want to, and after that, they dropped it. 2 years later, the school district tells me that I had 18 or 19 teachers tell me at Kenny's graduation, thank you, you made us a better. And the school district, his senior, asked me to write a brochure to help parents know how to deal with learning disabilities, the 504. And I know 10 years later, they were still giving that thing out. So, but at that point, it was like I had to do something that really is not against my nature. I mean, that is, not my nature.
Right. You're very peaceful, generally.
But, okay, you have left me no other alternative. Right. And that is secure. Now, if I'm going around suing everybody and going ballistic for, and sending in the U.S. Enterprise to attack a rowboat, so to speak, that's a
little bit borderline, secondary psychopath. Yep.
Yeah, that would be. But in that instance, and because it was secure, I bet you there's been thousands since there of kids who have graduated from high school that would not have, because this particular school district just wasn't dealing with people the way they should have, not only legally, but just if they actually cared about their students.
Right. I've often asked people, like, why do I have to ask nice and then have to finally I get mad and then there's a change?
Oh, anger. And when we talked about anger earlier, a lot of people give anger. Oh my God, you can't be angry. Now it's what flavor of anger, out of control, burn down the earth stuff, all that stuff. No, that's not what we're talking about. But anger is a protector.
Right.
When it is secure, it is saying, ouch, that hurt. It is saying, it is protecting. I once had a dream where anger came up to me and said, one of my 4 secure feelings is cherished and protected. I talk about that in my book. That's one of the core feelings that you have and you give and secure. And anger walks up and says, I am the protection and cherish and protected. It's, said securely. Now, if you're going off, that's a different thing. It's not grooved anger. It's not, anger that's being channeled from, because it's the family heirloom that's given in a family. It's contextual and it's appropriate. So, and what we want to see is in real attachment, the secure isn't some little Pollyanna nirvana. You have to deal with the real world sometimes. But it deals with it in a behaviorally flexible way. It understands the context, and it might say, okay, this is not the best deal available, but it takes the best deal available. The best deal available, 20 some years ago was I have to prove to some people that they have to obey the law, right? That was the only deal available. I would have rather have chosen dialogue, but they weren't choosing that. So then I had upped the game. Now, I say all that so that that I think there's freedom, realizing that all the tools are available to secure. We have a wide option, but we have thought about it. We have we've weighed consequences. We've talked with friends, and we know, okay, this is maybe outside of what I would normally want to run in a relationship, but in this instance, this is the best deal.
Right, because nothing else is effective.
Now, those can be marginal experiences. Nevertheless, we are all given them sometimes.
Right. Well, in your book, Safe to Love Again, which I think is an extraordinary book and one of the finest I have read on attachment styles and attachment theory, will you share with the audience the 4 main criteria for knowing that the love itself is safe and it's safe to further engage with a person in an intimate way?
Sure. I talk, I asked the question in the book before I wrote it. How can you reconstruct a secure love style when you've been given anxious or avoidant or disorganized? And so you have to get down, what's at the base? What's at the base? The real base. And as I'm thinking about it, my mind goes back to something called the strange situation, a famous test by Mary Ainsworth, an experiment where you separate children between 10 months and 18 months old. So we're talking toddlers, basically a year old. and you separate them from their mother and you see how they react. And then how do they react at the reunion?
Right.
And we find out that you can spot anxious and avoidant and disorganized and secure as early as 10 months. As early as 10 months. So then I said, okay, if it's set up by a year to a year and a half by toddlers, and it will track that way barring intervention. What's in that mind? What's going on in that mind? Well, a brain comes out 28 to 40% developed, right? And then it has to develop from there. And at a year, the hippocampus that has recall doesn't come on until 18 months. Prefrontal cortex that does beliefs and stories and identity, this part, it will not be myelinated, which means fatty sheaths around the neurons that turns it basically on. It will not come on till 3 years. So if anybody tells you it's limiting beliefs that's running the show, no, that's a little later. It's there to explain things. What's running? Implicit memory, holding feelings. When I mean not recall memory, but, and I go, oh my God, the only thing up and running are feelings. What feelings in particular now are telling that baby they're secure, or it's best to have a fight response like anxious attachment, or an avoidance response that does flight feelings. And then when I began to use neo-Reichian developmental psychology, 4 feelings tell a baby. And I looked at it in my clients, and I began to realize that certain feelings were like balm right on a bad sore. Welcomed with joy. Oh, little man, so glad you're here. You know, that little stuff, right? You know, oh
right.
my
And you
God.
see babies, they just like, oh, you know, they're so happy.
Yeah. Or when you wake up at 6 in the morning, you go, good morning, gorgeous. She goes, you must really love me. You know, that's welcome with joy. When you walk in and you give each other a 6-second kiss because you're glad to see each other at the end of the day. Then the second feeling is worthy and nourished to have my needs met. This is when you're in a relationship where someone is tracking your needs and preferences and your likes, you know, and they're noticing, they're present in the moment, and they can spot, looks like Beth is a little tired today. I wonder if she needs, you know, something or X, Y, Z, right? And you've got these beautiful, what Gottman calls love maps. And there's a flow of give and take, equally imbalanced. You know, and that doesn't mean that sometimes one doesn't give more than the other, but there's this feeling I am worthy to have my needs met, and I can reach out and have them. And it's okay to reach out. The third one that comes online about the time these toddlers are up and running is cherished and protected. About the time a kid, they think they're mom and dad. You know, me and mom are especially one dad, right? And then they get this awareness. The brain develops, and one day they're across the room. They go, whoa, wait a minute. I'm over here. Mom's over there. But wait a minute, I thought we were the same. Whoa, wait a minute. I'm a self. I'm separate. And they know they're a little vulnerable. And so they really need the protection and the cherishing feeling of being looked over and seen. And, you know, that's when you know, they're playing by their toys, and I don't want you to play with their toys. You go out to the get a cup of coffee, and you're trying to beat the clock, but they start crying because you left the room. This is the feeling of separate and belong in the heart of someone who sees an essence to you they can't get elsewhere. And you are in a protective we. This is the right to go out and do your own thing, but come back to a we. Not all do my own thing, not all enmeshed in a we. And the feeling is I am cherished and protected. Then the last one is empowered with choice. You could also, you know, empowered with voice. This is when a child gets the terrible twos, and then it tracks as, you know, do I have a right to assert my truth? And do I have a right to be the standard of my own experience? Okay. So they have a right to create their own experience and to assert, to raise their voice in a secure way, in a good relationship. You know, we have to teach babies that how to say it securely. And when you add up welcomed and worthy and cherished and empowered, you feel pretty lovable. That may be the fifth one, but I talk about the 4. Now, great couples are good at giving 4 feelings: welcome, worthy, cherished, and empowered. And anytime something is off, then you get more anxious or more avoidant. If you get one of those off, you got a few things to work on. Two, you're probably talking about where's their, my best friend's coach or therapist. 3 or 4, you're in a toxic. So the whole key is to swap out those early feelings of unwelcomed, unworthy, not so cherished and protected and disempowered, and to swap it out for the feelings, because they will run the ship too. There'll be protector parts and all sorts of patterns that don't work out. If we can swap out those feelings for the secure ones, a brain begins to pick and choose and create very, very differently. And so what I tell my couples, and this is harder on men because we've been trained not to deal with feelings, just track the feelings.
Right.
Just track the feelings. It's not like, it's like a couple of years ago, I was in here listening to my music too loud, and I didn't realize the front door had been
What were you
locked.
listening to?
Yeah, I was listening to Doobie Brothers.
Hey, they're pretty cool.
Oh yeah, I don't listen to them often, but I used to like them an awful lot. And I hear a knock over the music, and she'd been knocking for 5 minutes. And the moment I opened the door, I go, "I am so sorry." And I said, "I'll bet you didn't feel very welcome with Joy." And she goes, "No, I did not." And I make a repair there. I track
Right. Right. You
no way
repair it
this feels like-
immediately.
repair it immediately, right? And so because we're all going to give some of those other feelings at times, nobody's perfect. But if you can make that repair and find a way to give the good feeling, just track the feelings. And at the end of the week, couples, or even if you're in a new relationship, sit down. How did I do as a partner this week? Not, 1 to 10, right? And if anything is under a 9, then you're okay, where didn't I show up? And what was the feeling I gave you? And then figure out what both of you need to give that feeling to each other.
So simple. So
It's
elegantly simple.
4 feelings, track those things and learn the skills that give them. This is why at the end of every one of those chapters on the 4 feelings, I talk about what sets it up early, what it looks like in a secure relationship, what it looks like in anxious and avoiding, and then what is the skills? Now, if you don't have the feeling and you give someone the skills, it won't work. You can, if someone feels disempowered and you give them a lot of really cool things, tools like nonviolent communication, good luck. Good luck seeing them practice it, because disempowered is not, it's not safe to assert. So it's not just skills. You've got to feel and be able to give. I had one person that she had a real problem feeling worthy. And when people feel worthy, their counterbalance is to criticize their partner. And no matter how many times I taught her
Right.
the feedback loop, which is versus criticism, man, I mean, it would sneak in every little way that you could. I mean, she was a master of subtly criticizing, just the tint. And it wasn't until we really helped her feel really worthy herself that suddenly she didn't have the feeling inside to give. So we have to carry them. They have to feel safe, feeling welcomed, worthy, cherished, and empowered. And when we have them, we give them with certain skills. And when we give them, we can create and choose. And if we're not getting them, then we know the relationship's wrong. It is the GPS for love is 4 feelings: welcome, worthy, cherished, and empowered. Track them, know where you're at. Oh, looks like we're pointing towards unworthy. How do we point it back? This is secure attachment in a nutshell.
So what about the rise I'm seeing in narcissism? It seems to have exploded. And would these approaches work on someone who's highly narcissistic or has been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder? It seems to me they might not register or be willing to engage in this process.
I can tell you that from the statistics, that the best treatment facilities with clinical psychology with narcissism is about 14%. They're tough to do. If you get genuine personality disorder, now there's a lot of pop psychology, people listen to therapists talking about narcissism, and oh my God, they're naming every act of self-centeredness narcissism. That's an abuse. Go look at DSM, and Diagnostic Statistic Manual. It's version 6 now. I mean, if you get 5 or 6, look, there's like 9 criteria and you need 7 of them. Normal run-of-the-mill selfishness isn't that. But when you're dealing with that, it's pretty tough. If we're talking, like a former political leader, I wouldn't hold my breath on changing that one. And it is much tougher to change that. Now, if it's not all the way over there, but we're over on the spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
as I told one person that was over on the spectrum, they were far closer to MPD than, and they said, well, people have said I'm a narcissist. What do you say? I said, we could use that designation, or we could understand it this way. You had a very, very intrusive mother who was always trying to swap you out for someone else so that she could be feel grandiose. So she's the narcissist. So there is a reason why some part of you is so intent. The best deal available was to protect your sense of self at all cost. Good at 2, 3, and 4, not so good now, because now that is sucking all the energy from other people's cells, and then they don't feel loved. So we can either call it a label, or we could call it what it is, an early adaptive strategy. Now, if they're a hardcore narcissistic personality, they'll try to, they'll try to run a game back with you.
Right.
But when people are more over there, it can work. I think when they're hardcore, it's a few have done it. I've seen him a couple of podcasts with people, but 1 in 7 are going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I think we know that since 2005, narcissistic behavior, narcissistic personality has been on a rise from something like 5% to more like, some people have said even, past 10, 15%. And think about social media. The core of narcissism is what I call, a wounded right to create your own experience.
Mm-hmm.
So you go grandiose to do it versus shame. What feels better, shame or grandiosity? Grandiosity, just a crapshoot how the early brain makes that. And it's protecting that wound of, I don't have a right to have myself, my true authentic self. I talk about a little bit of this in the book, not much, but there's a paragraph or two. Now, if we look at that, and the real keys, in the right to have your experience, I have a right to be good and bad. That's how I thought of Excel. Strong, weak, light, dark, kind, meek. We all have these. The original wound is I have to be what somebody else wants me. I have to be, like when swapping hands, I have to be strong. I have to be light. I have to be all this other stuff, right? And we can't look at the dark side. So what does social media do? How many people get up there and it's all about, oh my God, I've got the time of my life. And you see perfect couples and even,
Right.
apps that take away the wrinkles and give you the big doe eyes and stuff. I know I had one client tell me that her daughter was afraid to actually be with people and go on Saturday night in high school to friends because the app made her look so good looking that then she didn't look like that. They'd notice it. This is how you create narcissism. She can't have all of her. She can't be loved for who she is. She has to be loved for an app that creates, you guessed it, a little more grandiose version of self that she can't be normal. This is how you spring narcissism. And you've got a culture of individualism that accentuates the individual's growth. And then you get social media that's all about, the good stuff. And that's why one time I put out a post of me at 7 o'clock in the morning with Caesar hair and said, by the way, this is what Dr. Salyer looks like at 7 in the morning. This is what I call a right to create my own experience. And I said, how many of you have seen a post like this? You haven't. And I said, but I'll bet you all look like that at 7 in the morning.
Yeah. I've actually thought of just starting to post like all the unvarnished parts of myself. And be like, if you still like me, you really like me, because this is really what I look like. And when I'm really mad, this is what I sound like. And here I am, and we all have that. Everybody takes a shit, and everybody gets upset and all that. I have a question for you about dating.
Okay.
So I have 3 questions actually three questions, and they're related. So the first one, and this feels really important because I do feel that with the advent of insurance codes in the 1950s and the pathologizing of everything human, that we don't even really know what normal or secure looks like. So you've sort of described it with these 4 emotional experiences, welcome with joy and that type of thing. But for a person scanning for what a secure relationship over the long term would feel like, can you give some criteria for that? That's the first part. What is normal? What is secure? And then how does an anxious person handle dating versus an avoidant person? where would be the edges that they could push so that as they open up their heart and they make themselves more vulnerable, they can trust that they're allowing the right kind of person into their life
Okay.
versus choosing from that unconscious wounded child place trying to protect the core self.
Okay. So the first question is, let me get a little more straight on it, is what is it? What does normal look like?
What does normal, aka secure, look like? Because we hear so much about what is wrong, but how do we know what's right?
Yes. Just by the way,
Correct. I don't mean right and wrong, but correct for the
yes.
individual.
Okay. We'll talk about it. I just want to say that I do believe the therapeutic yield over pathologizes. And that some people are even noticing it. The original DSM back in 1954 was like 52 categories. By DSM-5, it was over, I think, 316. Now, and as Bonnie Badenbach puts out in one of her books in just a little sentence, if you don't give somebody a pathologizing label, the insurance companies don't want to pay for it. So more and more normal behavior is getting pathologized.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, seasonal affective disorder. Now, if it's extreme, that might be one thing,
Right.
but I've had that too for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Why not seasonal affective patterning? Why do we
Right.
call it disorder?
Right. It's not.
Now, and with the advent of the internet, more and more therapists are talking about it, and then lay people come in and read it, and now suddenly, oh my God, everything is dysfunctional.
Right.
And now we've got a name for it. I just saw something. I wished I'd marked it down. It was the most common thing that people do when they kind of screw up in life. And now it's a disorder. I'm like, oh, for God's sake, right? A new one.
Yeah.
Brand new. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I see all these articles like 15 signs that you're this or that. And I read all these articles. I'm like, well, depending on the circumstance, any one of these behaviors would be appropriate. But like you said, it depends on the context. It depends on what's happening in the environment.
Yes. Normal is not perfect. Secure folk aren't perfect. We are living, we are growing organisms. We know and believe it or not, a good relationship needs that we respond to each other's bids.
Mm-hmm.
The high is about 85%, but for as little as 38% of really turning towards each other's bids for attention, you can have secure. Now, that's amazing. We'd like it to be above 50%, but you can still feel relatively secure in a relationship where you're actually screwing up to some extent, or not being present, or not being really attuned almost 60%.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Right. That's incredible.
Think about that. This is not perfection. We're not going into love nirvana,
Unless you're tripping.
Exactly.
And it's hard to work if you're tripping.
Ed Tronick wrote he's been doing attachment research since about 1970. Started with little kids. You can see him on YouTube. It's called the still face experiment, right? When a mother just goes still and the baby goes, oh,
yeah.
Yeah. And there's no response back. No matter what the baby does, there's no response back. That creates a disruption, a disrepair. And then there's the repair. Oh, when he comes back, and the baby's going, oh my God, mom's back. Right? Now, if you track this, he began tracking it with couples and everything. About a third of the time, we're really connected. We're doing good. We're responding to each other, right? Another third of the time, though, life has a tendency to pull us apart. We got our own stuff, whatever.
Right. Check you later. I gotta go. I'll talk to you later. Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Disconnection. And then a third of the time in repair, right? Just, so it's connect, disconnect, reconnect, connect, disrepair, repair. 70% of the time we're in some state of repairing or being in disrepair. Now, the true art of being secure is you have to repair like they used to do voting in Chicago early and often.
Right. Or like the minute there's a little tiny hole in the wall, right? And I was thinking like Holland, there's a little hole in the dike in the wall.
Yes.
You got to patch it because otherwise the whole city's going to flood.
So normal is you will have your stuff. And then what I would say is the secure are looking at, I have a pattern of not being present. She's told me that. I wonder how my brain is creating this. How am I doing this? Oh my God. Every time that thing comes off and I give it, connection, And priority, oh Lord, this thing has replaced, oh my God, this thing has replaced them. I need to be able to turn that off and have some we time with this person that I love. This has to get priority. Or you're looking at your own stuff and you are creating a right to create your own experience. You are empowered to rewire. So this has been my life journey, is how do I become more and more? I observe my experience from a wise higher self, and I go, of all the experiences I could have created, look at the one I just did. I wonder how I did that and how can I do it better? This is the art of being secure. Because in any relationship, it will evolve, grow, people's needs change, and there's no one, set of criteria. I mean, there is some truth to the statement in the heterosexual world that men marry women hoping they'll never change, and women marry men hoping they will change. There's some truth to that.
Mm-hmm.
The real point is knowing that how do you adapt and stay, and you will have to, and reworking, noticing, every time she does this, I get this reaction. And I've said that maybe feels like mom. Oh, I'm running that stuff. I can still remember being married the first time I married a pastor's daughter. And my best friend was from third grade. And one time we're just hanging out about 10 months into marriage. And I say to him, sometimes I think she reminds me of my mom. And he looked at me like I was crazy. He says, take that crap home. He used another word. He says, what are the chances that a pastor's daughter is acting like a borderline woman who has gotten into bar fights, because, and with men? And he goes, don't run that crap on her. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm so looking for it. And I'm not a scared 5-year-old anymore. I don't have to be looking for work, and confirmation bias being what it is. And you have to look and go, yeah, that's not fair. That's not cool. And if you got, and so that was a place where I did, okay, time to let go of some of the defenses and the grooved ways of seeing things. Because at one time it was good looking out for all that crap. You didn't know where it was coming. Right? Best deal available, but not so good 20 years later. And you're married for the first time.
Nice.
Yeah. So this is the art of being secure. That's normal. You have a right to be flawed and fabulous.
Right.
You take no BS and you give no BS. And when you give BS, you own up. That's
right away.
Yeah. Now the anxious, the growth point for them is their fight response was based on early attachment, attention, support, there, not there, there, not there, there, not there. And some part goes, how do I lock this thing down? And so you become hyper vigilant and you start to manage the crap out of things.
Right.
And in the fear that when does love go away? And that fear, when does love go away, is the gnawing fear under most anxious attachment. And to the place, like with one person I work with, he drove away 2 wives saying, well, when does love go away? And both said, finally, after 10 years, hey, if you don't know I'm going to stay now, fine, I'm done being mistrusted. And
self-fulfilling prophecy.
You got to get comfortable with separation.
Yes.
You're going to have your days of discomfort, and it doesn't mean you have to yell, and you can have too many bids for attention. I worked with a couple once where she had read attachment. This is a true story. And they're both professional. They're both professional people, right? And she says, he's avoidant. And I go, what's going on? He says, I text him when he's at work, and he only responds 50% of the time. The other 50%, he just hangs me loose in it, and then I don't know what's going on, and it just bothers the crap out of me, and I'm not getting the attuned response I need. Bring him in together next session. Ask him about it. He goes, yeah. And he pulls it out his phone. He says, she texts me 60 times a day.
Oh, good God.
And I have been responding about 30. And I can't.
30 times a day.
Now,
I'd lose my mind with 10.
So notice it is 50%.
Oh, man, he's like really trying, but my God, the man has to get some work done. Oh,
now,
wow.
she's labeling him an emotionally unavailable man.
Right.
Because of what she's heard on podcasts. And
but it's really her perception.
Almost ready to lose his job.
Right.
He's almost ready to lose his job because he texted her back trying to meet her anxious bid at the wrong time in a meeting. Yeah. And boy, the higher ups came on his butt like you wouldn't believe.
As they
Now,
should.
this is how anxious now notice now this is how anxious attachment misconstrues, and everything is about. She needed to be more comfortable. We had to work with that fear of when does love go away. Now, for a 2-year-old, that if someone is in a room with you for 2 hours or 3 hours, you can get your butt in trouble.
Right.
That's that normal childhood cry of, I need to be cherished and protected in a week. But there was no map, and she didn't have that feeling. When she got more, we got the feeling inside of her, I'm cherished and protected. And then as an adult, 3-4 hours without, contact is good. So they've got to become more more tolerant of distance, separation. Okay.
Right.
Now, I'm going to point out something. I'm dealing with what I call the right to separate and belong. This feeling, this right to separate and belong is at the core of every couple that I've ever met with. One or both won't have it, don't understand how to cherish and protect it. They don't have the feeling internally, and they don't know how to separate and belong and create a we. So now, if we go over to the avoidance side, over here, the fear is, when does love stay? A lot of times they I should say, they didn't get enough attention. They just said, it's best to do it on my own, And so there, when does love stay is a little bit off. I shouldn't have said it quite that way, by the way. But, it can be in a few minor instances. But it's the idea that I have to do it on my own. Now, this is deeply subconscious.
Of course.
We know that avoidant babies learn to walk on average 2 months earlier than the secure, the anxious. Why? Because they know the cavalry is never going to come over the hill for them. And that binky you want to cross the way, you can't yell, you can't scream enough to get it, then you better walk and get it yourself. This is not conscious. No baby learns to walk early. This is deeply unconscious. So when they are not doing their Marlboro mate thing, out there by themselves, right? The only thing you ever saw with a Marlboro man was a horse, right?
Right. Or ate a cigarette and then he died of lung cancer alone.
Exactly. And by the way, the original Marlboro Man was a guy that was married his whole life, had 3 kids, and was very secure, but he just happened to be a handsome double, but nevertheless, we talk about this, now they will get the heebie-jeebies with dependence.
Yes.
Oh boy, the dependence, closeness is the same thing as, not always there, right?
You're too needy when you're just like, hey, can we have a conversation? It's been 6 weeks since we had sex. You're too needy,
Oh,
like any kind of need, right? You're too needy.
Exactly. They are scared. They're not only scared of closeness, they learn they can't depend on dependence.
Right. Yeah.
So we will freak them out because they never learn to trust a we. And their discomfort is, what do you mean I have to share my feelings? And then they'll do things like, well, you're teaching, you're working with an avoidant. You use often, and say this as a husband in this instance, and you say, so, how'd you feel about work? Well, I felt that Bob didn't do very good with the PowerPoint. What's the feeling? Well, no, I felt like, and you said, no, give me an emotion word, and I had to give them. Okay, I have to use one of those words. Yeah, like sad, angry. They didn't get the emotional attunement. No, the parent did not emotion coach. They did not get a map of their own interior. It's not that they're being pernicious. They do.
Right.
They're learning their feelings for the first time. So the discomfort is going to be with feelings and dependence. And with the anxious, it's with separation. Again, and the right to separate and belong is the very heart and soul of secure attachment. Go out, do your big thing, but somebody, while you're out there pursuing your self-actualized dreams, this is the difference between cultural and radical individualism and secure attachment. You get to go out and pursue your greatest dreams on the high wire act of your aspirations, and somebody is going to be the safety net underneath.
Right.
That is secure attachment.
Beautiful.
And
that's so great.
Way you risk more. And when you both give each other that right, and you are beautifully supporting each other's dreams, separate. With my beloved, she's doing something totally different in life. She doesn't want to talk attachment.
Right.
She's over in the financial world.
Right.
I'm sure don't want to teach. I don't want to talk much about annuities and everything else. I mean, she finds that all interesting. I'm going, oh God, but you listen and you support each other's dreams. And there is repair and disrepair. And so if you notice, neither of the anxious or the avoidant know how to make a decent repair.
That's
One
right.
superheats the conversation, the other one puts it on the frozen tundra. And a lot of emphasis has been given, especially in women's coaching circles, on the emotionally available man. My experience is that the anxious can overheat and you can overheating will kill an engine the same way as underheating.
That's right.
Flour, too much heat, too little heat.
Well said.
So one is not better than the other. In fact, the book Attached has a well-known bias that a lot of people have read Attached against the avoidance.
Yeah, I noticed that. I read the book. I was like, that's not really fair to the avoidant.
No, it is. And they told the anxious, marry the secure. And they told the secure, marry an anxious person because, once they calm down, they will be the most loyal of people because they will have that secure relationship. Well, after that, some astute observers and researchers said, is that really true? Is it really true that the secure will pull the anxious up on their pedestal? And after you do the research, you find out that 68% of the time the anxious pair up with the secure. The anxiousness doesn't heal by itself. All that anxious does, like the story I just told you about. And 68% of the time, you guessed it, they pull the secure off their secure pedestal and becoming what's known as situationally avoidant or situationally anxious. And remember, and in this instance, it's legitimate, like I talked about. It's contextually. There's no difference. You can have, I haven't ever used it in public. You can have an emotionally over-available partner. I would like to use partner versus man or woman.
Right.
There is emotionally unavailable women too. I mean, so just notice that it's not the avoidance got it naturally. So did the anxious. Both of them took the very best deal. Young Gary, I can still remember when part of me chose to be more avoidant. 4 years old, up in there playing with my rockets, and I'm thinking, I want to be with mom down in the kitchen. And then I think of how many times I've hit the wall when she's angry. And I say, I'd rather play with my rockets.
Yes.
Distance.
Yeah.
Being by yourself. Yeah. Better deal, right?
Less
now,
drama.
When I run that with my first wife and she says I'm lonely, not so good. Now that's the best deal available. The same way the anxious took. It's stop judging it and realize that whatever you did, if you're listening, whatever your pattern is, there is nothing wrong with your brain. It took the best deal available. If a brain gets to choose between crappy and crappier, it will take crappy. But now you can observe your experience. You can look at those fears that say, oh my God, I got to be texted back in 10 minutes, or I better wait 3 days to make sure I'm not too close.
Right. All the games.
You can, instead of doing these little games, and then coaches trying to give little strategies instead of dealing with the real problem, you can look at that and go, gosh, is it really necessary to think somebody has to be on a chain and has to respond 10 minutes to say they care about me? Is it really caring to make a woman or a man wait 3 days while I'm playing grandiose Joe Cool, right? And one part is just scared of closeness. It's looking at that and having the courage to say, we all deserve better than this.
Oh,
and
so beautiful.
I deserve to give better, and I deserve to take better. I deserve to not give BS and to take no BS. If we can all use that beautiful, wise self that can observe and start repatterning ourselves, work with a coach, work with a therapist, to get somebody that understands the deep work, not just prefrontal. Talk therapy isn't going to do this. Labels aren't going to do this. But if you can do the deep work, this is when we change the world.
Oh, thank you, Gary. And on that note, let's end here. I'd love to have you back. This is amazing. And for everyone watching, the info will be down in the description. And I thank you so much. And I'd love to have you back. I would love to have you back for a longer session. This was
Let's do it.
Profound and useful. And I feel that you're actually bringing a voice that's very much needed now in this dialogue, because I see online battles between the sexes, people making women wrong, people making huge groups of people, men are wrong, women are wrong, this is
Yeah.
wrong, that is right. Like everyone's looking for someone to blame instead of, wait a minute, how do I show up? How do they show up? And how can we find a way to meet? So thank you so much. Any final words of wisdom for our viewers and listeners?
Well, I will say one time I heard a phrase, and it's got limited, but it tends to be true. Blame is for sissies. Taking responsibility. Now that is a higher self and an adult talking. And, my biggest thing that I want to leave everyone with is no matter where you are in love, you're not screwed. Your brain just took the best deal available, and change is doable. And you have a right to a secure love. And you were born with that right. It is a birthright. Reclaim it. That's my goal. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Align to Your Design. If you did, please grab my free report, Business by Design, at yourpurpose.com, and then join our Facebook group, Align to Your Design. See you next time.